Tonight on Mysterious Library, we're looking at a fascinating new documentary called The Conspiratologist. It looks at the lives and times of a veteran UFO and conspiracy researcher, Norio Hayakawa, who, interestingly, I'm also interviewing on this coming week's episode of Talking Weird. But for now, we're just going to look at The Conspiratologist, the film itself, on Mysterious Library.
Greetings and salutations, mysterious librarians. We're all here. At some point, once Midwest Weird Fest is done, we're going to have to go back to actual books because, I was in the library getting ready to, watch this one, and the Gorgons were calling medieval manuscripts and bestiaries, and I'm like, I got to go back to the theater, guys, and they're very, very sad. Yeah, they miss me.
I'm just going to petition Doug and see if we can't change the name of the show to Mysterious Video Library. Kind of what it's been for the last few months.
Yeah, it has. I mean, it's been fun though. I mean, we've had a lot of. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff. We'll get back to books here in a little bit, but we got Midwest Weird Fest coming up, and tonight's video that we're discussing is going to be at Midwest Weird Fest. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. There's no way I couldn't not play this film when it came across my desk in the submission process for this year's festival. I've been aware of Norio Hayakawa's work for years. He's a veteran researcher in the field. And we'll get
Dude's been around forever.
He's a wonderful human being as well. I didn't personally know him before I was aware of him, but since the film was playing and I reached out to him to interview on this week's Talking Weird, just a beautiful human being, absolute pleasure to communicate with, very giving. You can just tell he's one of the good guys. So I'm so glad we have a movie which in many ways celebrates his life. It does very non-judgmental, this documentary. It really lets Norio just kind of put his positions out there. I think it's pretty balanced.
No, it's lighthearted. It doesn't, I mean, it's very, very short, all things considered, right? But I kind of liked it because, unless you want to get in depth on certain things, if it's just, if it's just about who and what he is and what he does, then it's a perfect length, and there's a lightheartedness to it. There's a joy of what he's been doing that I really appreciated. I mean, it could have been a little bit longer. I think I could, wouldn't have gotten boring if it had been 45 or 50 minutes long, but I like the fact that it was short, to the point. It was very concise. And you just get the feeling that Norio is, again, I've never met him personally. And again, like you, I've known about him for decades. This is a guy who's been around. And it's one of those things where you hear him, he's everything about him just seems like it's just this really nice guy who just is, like you said, he's one of the good guys. He's there doing it. We will definitely be talking about this later. His love of country and Western. We are going to have to address that. But But yeah, no, the film is very, very, it's light. It doesn't try and evoke emotions that aren't there, right? It's not trying to be exploitative of anything. Just here's this guy, here's what he's done, here is, really just a few of his thoughts, and then you're done. And you're like, oh, well, that seems like a cool guy doing cool stuff.
Yeah, that's what I love. I love many things about Norio, but I do love his love for country and Western. He's an immigrant who's like me as an immigrant to America. He came to this country clearly loving the culture and wanting to become part of the culture. Like, I'll be honest, I don't have a musical bone in my body, but I listen to predominantly now country and Western music because I live in rural America. That's what I listen to, and it's because I've always wanted, since I've moved here, to feel like, I'm part of the culture here. And Norio strikes me as that same type of immigrant, somebody who goes to another country and then wants to be part of that country. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yes. Okay. I guess we're going to talk about country music now. Okay. Because here's the thing. Like, once he started playing it, like he's playing, I use the word Casio. I know that's not what it is, but like that sort of old school electric piano kind of thing. And it has that sound, and I'm listening to, and it's like the country and Western he's playing is a very, very specific slice of time. It's that late 70s, sort of early to mid 80s country and Western. And it's, for those who are not aficionados of the history of country and Western, it is a very specific slice of time. I'll say that. And it's very distinctive, right? Most people, like, I don't even want to talk about modern country. No. But a lot of country that people think about, they either think about really old school Johnny Cash, right? Or they think about the 90s stuff, like your Garth Brooks, your Shania Twains, and it kind of bleeds into in the 2000s when you start getting your more pop country stuff. That's what we get today, right? Which is just utter trash. Bro country, I hate. And fifth generation Texan, I get to have an opinion on this one. So when he started playing, I'm like, I know exactly what he's playing. And I listened, I heard it growing up. It's a very, very specific slice of time. Ain't nobody going back to it, but it's a very specific and telling slice of time.
There's a Whalen cover in there somewhere. I think there's a snippet of a Whalen cover in there in the film.
Oh, there is. Yeah, no, and it's just weird to hear it played on again a Casio, right? I know that's not probably what it technically is, but I'm just throwing it as a placeholder. And most people understand what I'm saying when I say that. It was just that whole section I just love that whole little slice and section of him being this fan of country and Western and playing with, with someone who is Indian and Irish, right? And it's just, I love that whole section. It's just, there was so much joy in his playing and in his enjoyment of it. I loved it. That may be my favorite part of the entire show. Like, I love it overall. And there's one point I really want to talk about, but like, as far as things that made me just smile and I just really appreciate it, it was that. It's that little section right there.
I love it how he says you can't just look at UFOs and conspiracy theory all the time without going mad.
Yeah.
So that was what he was interested in. He needed a pastime which had more joy in it, and that was music for him, which was, it makes a lot of sense, really. And he also has a specific brand of his own music called Cosmic Wave, I think, as well.
Yes, he does. Yeah. Yes, he does. And anyone from the 80s very much recognizes it. It is a very 80s sound. A lot of the sort of more new age, meditation stuff draws from that. But there was that, very, very late 70s, to through 80s synthesizer movement, right? And that his cosmic music that's what it is. It is that 80s synthesizer, movement, and it is its own thing. I will say that. I'll say it that way. It is very much its own thing. But if you grew up in the 80s, you've heard it before.
Oh yeah, if Midwest Weird Fest had a real budget, I would have flown him in and done an actual Cosmic Wave concert as a sidebar
Mhm.
event to the screening. That would be fantastic. Maybe one day down the track, if
Yeah.
I've got a bit more of a budget, I could do a Norio concert at Midwest Weird Fest. That would be
Oh, that'd be
spectacular.
awesome. Yeah,
Be
that'd be
so good.
awesome.
Be so
Yeah,
good.
let's make certain you have the money to do that next year so I can be there and,
We need to do a Kickstarter just to get Norio into Midwest Weird
exactly.
Fest. We need to go.
Uh-huh. Yep. That would be amazing. That'd be fun.
That sure would. But there's some seriousness in the documentary as well, of course. It strikes
Yes.
at a few notes that we talk about an awful lot on this program. That's
Yes, we
why I
do.
thought it was so good.
Mhm.
And when I'm watching it, I'm like, wow, some of this stuff could be right out of an episode of Mysterious Library. Jason
Yeah,
and I touch on these
I had
topics
the
all the time.
yes, I had the exact same thought. I'm like, again, he's been around forever. And I don't know that he's necessarily an influence on either one of us specifically. But I think you put us in a room, we're going to agree on a lot more than we disagree on. And to your point, the point about actually Horace's point about how, the opposite of joy. I want to save that one towards the end. Because that's a really important piece of what he talks about. Again, it's interesting that we reviewed that on the day that we did. That's all I'm going to say. I'll save that for later. But probably my personally, aside from that part, the thing that really got me, really got the juices flowing, and I was like, there it is, right? Is when he talks about, because again, for those who don't know, this guy has literally been around doing this since the early 80s. Like, he has been around just forever. He interviewed Bob Lazar very early on. And it's his story about that interview, for me, is like the final nail in the coffin, on my opinion, for Lazar. Now, we have not talked about this beforehand, so what you're about to see, if you're listening on the audio podcast, everything that happens is unscripted. Okay. Dean and I have not talked about this, so this is either about to be the biggest love fest you've ever heard, or it's about to get real. I have never believed that Bob Lazar was anything other than A, a scammer, or B, a very willing disinformation operative. I have just at no point in my time in this research and listening to him have I ever taken him seriously as a whistleblower. It's not because his stories were outlandish or anything like that. At no point, like, even before I get too far into it, like, just every time I listen to them, the back of my head's like, this isn't right. This dude is not what he says he is. The story Norio tells about interviewing him, really, it's like, if you've ever given Bob Lazar that kind of, any kind of credibility, please listen to what he's telling you about about this interview. It is very, very telling. Now, Dean, I want to hear your response, because this is either going to be beautiful or it's going to be tragic, but it's going to be fun either way.
Imagine if I got all mad with you and said, "How dare you criticize Mr. Lazar? He bought us
the sacred."
Well,
yes.
Well, of course, most people are aware of my suspicion on any type of ETH, explanation. The idea that we have crash sources and are back engineering them. I'm not sure who or what Bob Lazar is, or who or what his motive is, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that he was working on back engineering flying saucers in Area 51. I will say that much. So whether the story, as you said, is Lazar fabricating it whole cloth, whether he was brought in as some type of patsy, do you know what I mean, and showing us a few things and then ushered off to spread the disinfo, that seems a rather elaborate way of doing it. I mean, I suspect, as Norio does as well, and this is spoiling a little bit of the interview, because I had to pre-record this Saturday's Talking Weird, which I don't like doing because I'm going to be at Midwest Weird Fest on Saturday night. There's no way I can do a live Talking Weird. But Norio, again, it was very much like so many of our conversations. He thinks there's a small cadre of people that have been responsible for an awful lot of the UFO belief that we have today, including Bob Lazar. He also mentions William Moore. He also mentions Rick Doty. So he's right on the Mysterious Library, kind of train, the type of thing we talk about all the time. So he puts Bob Lazar within that type of package, that type of cadre of people that we normally talk about, who started promulgating so much of this information in the late 70s, early 80s. So I suspect that Norio's close to correct, if not totally correct, in that assumption. Certainly the Lazar story did an awful lot to further that type of X-Files belief that I the term that I use to talk about it, crash sources, back engineering, underground alien bases. The Lazar story really propped that up. But Lazar was one of, again, what most people today believe about UFOs comes from a handful of, whether you want to call them researchers or whistleblowers or disinfo agents. It all comes from this very small group of people who are very prominent in getting these belief systems out there. And I think I often get so sidetracked because I'm so interested in Doty and Moore and Chandere and that cadre, that it's easy to forget about the important role that Lazar plays in that as well. What his connection is with those people, there mightn't be any direct connection, but he's certainly one of those key figures in promulgating a story which I don't believe. So in that, again, I think, Jason, unfortunately, we're not going to have that throwdown fight that we keep hoping.
One of these days, we're going to have a knockdown drag out, and I'm going to win.
Probably,
but it's only because I'm prettier than you. That's why. Anyway, that's again, that's a fight you would lose. But I want to, we got to derail on Lazar for just a moment, because Texas Jack, I think, is exactly like, we're on the same wavelength here. I'm going to throw that up there real quick. For those listening, Texas Jack says, I always figured if you blow the whistle and that kind of thing, they don't just erase your academic and work history, they erase you. And it would be one thing to say that Lazar was just making it all up, except that he's like, you go here on this date at this time, and you'll see some stuff from Area 51. I'm sorry. If he's able to tell you that, and the military isn't showing up telling you to get lost, they want you there. The military wants you there. That's why I never bought the whole, well, he's just making it up. Well, if he's making it up, then he wouldn't be able to tell you, go be here at this time, and you'll see some stuff pop off. The fact that stuff popped off when they got there should tell you that they wanted them to be there. Because I'm sorry, this is Area 51, the most top secret thing in the history of ever, and they know you're there. Of course they know you're there. They've got all the sensors. They know where you are before you're there. They know. So why wouldn't they just say, okay, we're going to hold the test and let's get some choppers out there and just run people off? That's what they would do if they really wanted to keep it secret. Those things were staged so people could take pictures and video and have all these sightings, right, to prop up Bob Lazar. That right there tells you government. The other thing is, back to Texas Jack's point, and this is always my thing, if you're a news reporter and you find the wrong thing in the CIA, you end up suicided. If you're a person who has connections to particular political individuals who may or may not vacation in certain unusual and interesting locations in the Florida Keys, you commit suicide by, on and on. It's not like getting rid of somebody and having it ruled a suicide is all that hard to do. They do it quite publicly. Someone like Lazar, they just wipe his history, they erase him, it's over. And particularly in the early 80s, there's no internet for anyone to talk about it. So I'm sorry, I never bought this idea that this guy could have all this information and then just go talk about it to the universe, and everyone at the DoD is like, oh dang, he just got out and started talking. Oh no, whatever. We certainly can't suicide him now. It's the early 80s. There's just nothing we can do. Our hands are tied. He beat us to the press. Sorry, Bob. No, I don't think Bob Lazar is a legitimate figure. And this documentary the story that they tell, I don't want to give it away, really should just be that should be that moment where you're like, well, okay, this is exactly what Jason was talking about, what Dean's talking about. It's whatever Lazar is, like I said, Dean's going to be a little bit more scientific, or I guess more academically accurate, saying, I don't know his motivations. You know what? I'm not saying I know his motivations. What I'm saying is, from the activity that's public, it seems really suspicious that this is either a guy who's blown the whistle or is just a schizophrenic. Like, there's neither of those jive.
I think we have to be careful as well. I don't even think I'm in the UFO community, but I think the UFO community needs to be more careful getting so excited every time there's the sense of a whistle being blown.
Right.
So whether we see the Tic Tac videos release and everybody gets all excited, you know what I mean? Or whether Bob Lazar comes out and says something, people get all excited.
Yeah.
One could imagine a myriad of reasons why elements within the military or within the government might want to release some not exactly true information. Also, disinfo has some truths in it. That's how it works. Why you might want to get that out. And certainly Area 51, you can imagine why it's much better to say, well, we're testing, crashed reverse engineered flying saucers out of Area 51, and to make all of the stories then circulating around there just sound ridiculous. And there's a quote from Norio about Area 51. He reads it out of a paper during the interview in the Conspiratologist, and it's so spot on. I'm just going to read it because it's so good. There's nothing extraterrestrial or strange there. This is him talking about Area 51. It's good old American technology. The government sits back and watches and sometimes manipulates these UFO stories to keep people from asking about the real activities there. And I think that's a much saner way of explaining why they might want this type of information to get out, rather than that a rogue physicist blew the whistle on a crashed retrieval program. Like, it's just what stretches the imagination more. It's much, I don't know why we have to go to that ridiculous length to believe the most extreme story, when if we step back for a moment, we can think, well, why might somebody want this story out there in that position? And it's pretty obvious. And Norio's little quote there, is in a nutshell why they might want it out there. It confuses what's really going on at the base.
Well, and here's the other thing, right? It's, again, most people live their lives not having to think like this. This is just, as far as how the military and the CIA, how they think. Having Area 51 be sort of public, but not at the same time. It's not just us that they're lying to. It's them, right? It's the Russians. It's the Chinese. It's everybody, right? You don't want all of your military secrets being found. The SR-71 is my favorite jet of all time. Just period. End of story.
And it looks cool in X-Men illustrations. Right?
I'm not saying that's why. I'm just saying it didn't hurt. Okay. But no, again, the SR-71 is my favorite jet. And during the development, they knew when the Russian satellites were going to be coming over, so they would stage things to create disinformation. As long as we're all thinking, okay, they're experimenting on this stuff, the Russians know it's not an actual UFO, but they're going to still be focusing on Area 51 and not like say, oh, Area 52. I don't know that there's an Area 52. I'm just saying as a colloquialism, right? Fill in the blank. What's going on at Area 52 or Area 53, right? Again, they are trying to hide not just from us, but from them. And the easiest way to hide from them is to hide from us, so that we're saying and doing all this stuff, and they read what, particularly it's the 80s and 70s and 80s, right? They know that they're going to be plumbing through all the different radio programs and television programs and newspapers. So they're going to put all that together, and they are going to put it out. And so everyone's going to keep focusing on Area 51 and not say, oh, maybe some other installation that is perhaps working on something a little bit more exotic or something a little bit different, right? So it's, again, why would someone like Bob Lazar, why would the government create this person, I don't mean they grew him in a lab, I mean the persona, and give these things so that he has credibility in the public. It's not just because they want to pull one over on us, though they do. It's so that they can hide what they're developing from the Chinese and from the Russians and from Brazil and it's, India, North Korea. They are hiding these things.
Something else in the documentary which is related to this, which is very telling, and it's interestingly, it's a point that I made in my PhD thesis in a slightly different way, but I honed in on the same issue, and that is 1947 is a very significant year in the history of the national security state in this country. It's when the National Security Act is signed. It's when the CIA is founded. It's when the Air Force comes to be. It's also when Roswell happens, surprise, surprise. It's also when saucer flaps start happening, surprise, surprise. So Norio understands, and let's just, for a moment, not say whether UFOs are extraterrestrial or not. Everybody knows my position, I'm just prepared to be neutral for a moment. Regardless of the reality of what UFOs, flying saucers, are or are not, to study those things and to not understand what was going on politically and socially in this country at the time where they appeared is naive. To go one step further, it's interesting that with the development of the national security state, all of a sudden there were large areas of both physical geography as well as metaphorical geography. There were areas of government and areas of space in this country which were essentially closed off from the democratic or Republican principles of this country. And when you have areas which aren't mapped, you can have a Kong Island again. King Kong made sense prior to World War II because the Pacific hadn't been fought all over, and you could have an island there where there could have been a giant ape. Post World War II, the King Kong story is ridiculous, right? It is, because we fought on every single inch of every weird little island and atoll there fighting the Japanese. But all of a sudden in America, there's all these spaces where you can't go. There's spaces where you can't go also just to understand what's going on democratically. There's all these sealed off. It probably starts during World War II, but it becomes super apparent after the National Security Act of 1947. So this new landscape of America is rife to have these beliefs attach themselves to it. So the idea of a secret UFO base like Area 51 or like a Hangar 18 or like something hidden under Dulce Mesa, that makes no sense prior to 1947. But all of a sudden, you can project these ideas onto these spaces, or perhaps the government lets you or encourages you to project those ideas onto these spaces. And all of a sudden, a mythology that would have made no sense prior to World War II in the United States of America makes a lot of sense, because areas are closed and the imagination can put all kinds of things in there. And it's so obvious, but it's also probably threatening to a lot of people who believe this is real, because then you have to question their belief system and say, that's true. None of this stuff made sense before 47. All of this stuff comes after 47. And Norio's conscious of that in there. He says it in a slightly different way, but he makes the point, because he's a resident of New Mexico as well, which is ground zero literally to all of this. It's ground zero to Roswell, but it's also ground zero to all of these Air Force bases, from Holloman to Kirtland to the idea of what's the underground base in Zano Mountain, to the Dulce Mesa story. All of these stories are such an important part of UFO lore, but New Mexico was such a vital part of the national security apparatus as well. And this is important for us as a community. Well, again, I feel like I'm outside the community, but for the UFO community to really look at, to see how these things parallel and are interjoined. Because if you want to start understanding what's really going on, you have to start asking, what happened in that space? What's the historical significance of 47 going forward?
No, absolutely. Again, that's a great scene where he drives out and he's like, theoretically this place has been decommissioned. Real quick, I was on Untold Coffee, or the Untold Coffee Break, on Monday with Pine Island Jeff. Great show. So if you want to hear about my secret love of anime theme songs that have been covered in English. Go give it a listen. It's one of the newer shows on the channel. And it's great. It gives you a rundown of everything on Untold Radio AM, from the past week, and it gives you a little behind the scenes insight into who we as personalities are on this channel. It's a great little show, and Jeff's a great interviewer. A lot of fun.
I only caught some of your one because I'm so busy with Midwest Weird Fest.
Oh, yeah.
But I watched all of Doug's one, which was, I think, the week before, was it, or the week before that? It's great. It's such a low key, fun, chatty. It's a great show. I'm so glad. I messaged Jeff and saying this is such a fantastic addition to the network. It's such a great idea of his.
Oh, it is. No, it's a great idea. So again, guys, go listen to it. Again, don't go listen to me. Go listen to Doug's. It's way more interesting. I'm a very boring person. But going back to Norio, and to your broader point, because he's been around so long, he saw a lot of things, right? He's been around since day one. He saw this. He was there. He was making these interviews. He's had a very powerful impact on this narrative and from the public sense. He was there at the earliest conventions, speaking and talking. And he's worth listening to on this stuff. And I think we're kind of getting to that point where, why does he call himself a conspiratologist and not a conspiracy theorist? And he goes to a lot of detail as to why he wants to separate these two ideas. And this is, like I said, it's very telling that I was watching this today. Just because of what's going on sort of behind the scenes for me, he says there's a difference between us. He's someone who studies these conspiracy theories. And that's very, very different than someone who's like, let's go figure out what the conspiracies are and he's studying the actual phenomena of the conspiracy on people is sort of what he's more into. And which brings us sort of back to, again, why that music aspect of the film resonated so much with me is it brings joy to his life. And the thing is, a lot of these conspiracy theories, people who get into conspiracy theories, there is a point where it stops being, it sucks that joy out. It starts becoming destructive in a way, where the conspiracy theory itself sort of takes on life of its own and starts taking over your life.
Another little aside, which I thought was very telling and also goes to show how switched on Norio is they play a clip in the documentary of him speaking at one of these conferences back in the 80s. Yeah. He's a considerably younger man, so it's obviously some time ago. And he puts forward his idea that the very term UFO was created to be contentious and to cause confusion. It was a problematic term. And that is so just dead on the money, particularly today when we have Pentagon spokespeople saying we shot down a UFO. Mm-hmm. Because that the very term perhaps it does now what it was created to do. It throws all kinds of confusion and it gets people all hyped up about what it is and what it isn't. But Norio had cottoned onto that back in the 80s, that this term was no good. Yeah. That this term itself was problematic.
Oh yeah. I was talking about this last week, right? Was it last week or no, week before last? I talked about that on my Wednesday show. It's like, hey, they knew what they were, the people who were the spokespeople for the White House and for the military, they knew what they were doing by saying UFO. We shot down UFOs. They knew it. That is not an accident. I was like, people are like, well, maybe it was. No. That was entirely scripted. No one's getting up and saying UFO accidentally in those situations. It was deliberate. So again, Norio's point in the documentary, where he points this out, again, very, very early on, it's very telling. Again, he's been around forever, and he's someone that people need to listen to a little bit more, because he's been around for so long, and he's caught on to a lot of these things and says, oh, hold on, maybe this isn't what you think it is. By the way, real quick, Brian, he's caught it. So we're going to have to just go back. See, Ha! What do you do about that now, Brian? We can flip whenever we want.
Yeah, I was like, I don't even know how to flip us back when I disappeared for a moment. I'm like, I'm on the other side now. I wasn't bringing a whole lot of attention to it, but thanks for that, Brian.
Yeah. Well, so for those who are listening, and I'm going to give everyone a little bit of behind the scenes magic here. Our position on the screen, because it's sort of a split screen thing, our position on the screen often depends on like whoever does the opening, right? When the new video pops, the opening video pops up, whoever comes on second goes to like the right hand side of the screen. Well, the thing is though, if during the show we shut off the camera for any reason, well, you drop down, and then when you come up, we've switched sides. So I can manually switch the sides. It's just I choose not to because I feel like it's distracting. But if y'all want, we can do a little boogaloo here where we're just going to keep going back and forth. You'll never know. Is it Dean? Is it Jason? Can we know? I don't know.
Just can't tell.
It's like a 3-card Monty, paranormal 3-card Monty game with the Mysterious Library over here. First Dean's on the left. Now I'm on the left. Right.
Which way to face? Like,
yeah, I know. Like,
crazy.
See, that's the kind of power we have, but we don't inflict it upon you. We are benevolent.
Well, in fairness, you have that power because I disappeared myself for a moment so I could blow my nose, full disclosure, and the audience didn't have to watch. But then when I pop back up, I'm on the other side of the screen. I'm like, uh-oh, I don't know how to fix this now. And so I just sat there and didn't do anything about it. Oh, well.
We are so fired. Anyway.
Yeah, probably. Something else I thought, which is indicative of how self-aware Norio is, and I mean that in a good way, that he's self-reflective, I should say, perhaps, is how he's, in that documentary, quite conscious of the slippery slide that can happen when you look at these type of things. And perhaps the person he brings up is one of the most notable conspiracy theorists in the history of UFO belief, and that's William Cooper, the author of Behold a Pale Horse, which is an incredibly influential book still. It was influential on the X-Files. It was influential on anybody who was operating in that kind of late 80s, early 90s ufology. It was filled with all kinds of conspiracy theories. And Cooper had a radio show as well throughout, I think, most of the 90s into the 2000s. He ultimately, as most people who follow this stuff are probably aware, died in a gun battle with law enforcement agents in 2001. I believe he said that the IRS was going after him and he'd been targeted, but I think there were other issues locally that the sheriff was trying to enforce something. Anyway, for whatever reason, it was almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'm not being critical or praising Bill Cooper here. I'm doing neither, but you can go down that kind of road and you can end up in some very dark places. So I think it's important to be very suspicious of what the traditional UFO narrative is. And I think it's only sensible to tie it like we were to the birth and the development of the national security state. And I think one has to be naive not to think there are very good reasons, and some of them not even necessarily bad reasons. Perhaps some of them are why these stories would be spun by elements within the government. But then you can go to a weird place where all of a sudden you're living on the top of a hill, locking yourself in your house and, having an exchange of gunfire with local law enforcement and dying. So there is a slippery slope, and Norio's clearly aware of it's important to look at this stuff objectively and not to go down that total paranoid rabbit hole, because it's there waiting for people. And that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to die a violent death, but you can just go to some dark and whacked out places when you follow this down.
Yes. That's, like I said, it just resonated. That scene, in very much when we started talking about this, very much resonated with me, because unfortunately I have friends and for whom it does seem like if you're not careful, if you don't try and keep an objective viewpoint on all this, if you don't look at it dispassionately, it's very easy to start making this stuff not just it becomes, like you said, a self-fulfilling prophecy. It becomes destructive to people's personalities, to their relationships. Like, guys, I'm right. Like, don't get me wrong. If you trust the government, you're a fool. just straight up. And we're not saying, oh, well, everything in the news. No. Like, there's disinformation. We're saying this is all of this is disinformation, right? That's what we're saying here. And yes, there is a point where you can, but there is that line. Once you start getting into that line, it starts becoming destructive, and you end up hurting yourself. You end up hurting people around you, your relationships with your loved ones. And Norio is talking about that. You know, he talks about how, that's why he calls himself a conspiratologist, not a conspiracy theorist. And he even says he regrets some of those, you know, some of his early contacts, because he's like, you know, did I help spur this stuff on? Because here's the worst part of this, for just a moment, about the whole conspiracy theory thing. Again, I'm the one who's there and say the phrase conspiracy theory was created by the CIA, right? I'm over here saying this. I believe that. And there's reasons to believe it. But the thing is, when the government was manipulating the UFO community very early on for its own designs. We've talked about that numerous times on this channel. But the conspiracy theory crowd as well, right? Not necessarily the UFO stuff, but some of the other things, they're manipulating all of us this way. And because some of it is absolutely true, right? But they manipulate us. And the problem is, if you allow yourself to go too far, you're not actually doing anybody any good. And that is by design. These are people who in the 60s were experimenting on how to rewrite your brain. There is a reason why this stupid thing right here, which I have a green coating, which is why it's translucent. It's not some special magic thing. But why this stupid thing right here is worth billions upon billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. There's a reason why they produce these things at a loss. Because they know how to, because this stuff was, the algorithms in here, the programs in here that you're interacting with were designed by people who have spent the last 50, 60, 70 years figuring out how to manipulate us, to make you think a particular way, to buy certain products, to behave certain ways. Everything is there. Everything is a manipulation, and including conspiracy theories. They are behind a lot of these because it helps keep people from seeing what's really happening. And it is self-destructive. And so every time someone goes off the deep end, right, on some of these conspiracy theories, all you've done ultimately is actually given a lot of other people reason not to believe that there's something wrong. I forget who it was. It was a Holocaust survivor. And they said, what did you learn after World War II, the Holocaust, all of it? And I'm going to paraphrase. They said, 10% will do good no matter what. 10% will do evil no matter what. It's the other 80% you have to swing one way or the other. They know how to manipulate that 80%. They've spent a lot. I can't tell you how much money and lives they have spent learning to do that. Even the conspiracy theory is a part of that manipulation.
Oh, I'm sure most conspiracy theories are manipulated at some level or other. That's part of the problem. And we see that people are susceptible to crazy conspiracy theories regardless of their political perspective, or regardless where they sit on the right-left, dichotomy. And what's interesting, of course, is the mainstream criticize things which rightfully are ridiculous. QAnon's crazy. Like, QAnon's just mad, right? And whenever I say QAnon's crazy, my friends on the left go, oh, that's great that you think that. And I go, yeah, but Russia collusion was crazy as well. The only difference was the mainstream media were forcing that down everybody's throat. Now we know that was all just total nonsense, but you all believe that. And that was clearly a conspiracy theory. It was just a conspiracy theory promulgated by the people on top. And that's the problem. Often it isn't just the crazy fringe which believes in conspiracy theories. If you look at Nazi Germany, so much of their ideology of the party was based on nutty conspiracy theories. But you can look at modern political parties as well in supposedly democratic countries. And so much of their ideology is based on ridiculous, nutty conspiracy theories as well. People are susceptible. And that doesn't mean there aren't conspiracies, because there's no doubt there's conspiracies. People get together all the time to do malice and to do things illegally at big levels, at small levels. There's been conspiracies throughout history. History is filled with conspiracies. But there are these theories which people, regardless of their political perspective, are susceptible to if the theory pushes the buttons which suit their belief system. So it's something we have to be conscious of. Whoever's listening, whatever side you're on whether you consider yourself on the left or the right, or a Democrat or Republican, or wherever you are, if a conspiracy theory you really like and you're going along with it, think, do I just like this because it confirms my belief systems and my prejudices? Is that why I like it? Or is it based on something? Because it's very easy to fall into that mode of thinking. And again, I'm not saying there aren't conspiracies. There are conspiracies throughout history everywhere. But there are theories out there, i.e. QAnon, or on the other side of it, Russia collusion, which were just total nonsense. And people were hoodwinked left and right to believe these things. And I think Norio is conscious that, as you said, that back in the 80s, he might have been part of one type of conspiracy culture, but now he kind of, it isn't that he has any more trust in, the government necessarily, but he was conscious that he might have been, I think, one of those people who was spreading things which could go in weird directions as well. So.
Right. And essentially, it was, I found that scene, or that part, very touching, honestly. Right. And it's because he's saying, look, did I hurt people doing this? Right. That's a question. That's a question we should all ask is, hey, in our search for truth, are we being certain to make certain that we're not, like you said, falling into things that will hurt people? Right. Are we actually rightly dividing these things? Because it's hard, right? We've all got friends who've, particularly if you've been in this for any length of time, you've got friends who you look back on, and you're like, man, did I play a part in that? Right? Did I do everything I could to maybe keep them back on track? And it's hard. And so that scene was very touching, because he's asking himself, he's older. He's definitely an older gentleman. He's asking himself, did I hurt people in my pursuit of a true thing? Right. His family had witnessed some spectacular things. And so he was in search, like we all are, of spectacular things. But he's asking himself, as an older gentleman, did I help start something that's hurt people in the long run? And it's a touching moment for me. Like I said, the film does not go out of its way to exploit any one thing. So it's not like they don't do the exploitative thing where he's sitting there and they're playing the sad music and they don't do that. They just let the man talk and ask the question, and it's touching, because you realize you're not being manipulated. They're just telling you the truth about what this man's asking, about what he's facing at the end of his life. And it's a touching scene, and it's a question I think more people need to ask themselves.
Well, very few people have that degree of self-reflection. I'm not saying that I do. I probably don't have anywhere near that degree of self-reflection. But again, if sometimes we can step back and think, here's another way. I was actually talking to some people at my homeschool, the homeschool group my daughter goes to today. And I was saying, I'm becoming, as I get older, less certain if the things that even I believe aren't just psychologically driven. Like, I'm a contrarian by nature.
Right.
So today, that means I probably lead to a more conservative libertarian streak. I do. But what if I lived in a society with all the things I think I really liked? Do you know what I mean? And that was what was just, I had to accept that, Would I then become would my contrarian nature rebel? And would I be totally different politically? Or another way of looking at it, people who today might be rabidly call people they disagree with Nazis, right? They could very well have been the same people in Nuremberg Sieg Heiling, because they are easily caught up in a political movement that tells them the people over there are the enemy and they're evil, so you can be as aggressive to them as you want. So I tend to think today more and more that a lot of people's politics aren't driven really by a political understanding as much as they are by a psychological disposition. And that's a pretty frightening understanding to come to, particularly when you can kind of apply it to yourself and go, geez, I wonder.
Yes. I have asked myself that a lot. And again, a little behind the scenes, right? I believe in the supernatural. And I'm trying to reevaluate how I present these things. How do I talk about them? I want to make certain that it's coming across, right? There are people who've tried to make similar points or even different points, but do it in a particular way, and it gets completely misunderstood. You can never make yourself completely understood to someone who doesn't want to understand. But like I said, it's the other 80%, right, that you're shooting for. That having been said, that is a question I've been asking. Where is, right, that line between my thoughts and what I'm in the influence of these other outside forces? Why do I believe what I believe? And again, that's something my father drilled into me, is to ask that question. Well, I'm still asking that question, and sometimes it's hard to stop and say, man, how much am I being manipulated? Right? There's again, no names, nothing to do with this side of the fence, right? As far as paranormal, there was a very public face came out and said, because she has a very specific political leaning, and she sort of had a little bit of a comeback and just said, look, this is what happened. This is why I disappeared for a few years, right? And part of her story was very heartbreaking, because she said, I'm going to try and stay vague because it's really, the point is, the people that she was fighting against, if they had just said things a little differently, she may not have put herself in certain situations, because she said, hey, that's not an insane position to take. And really, I should probably follow some of this advice. It's not bad advice. But because of how they said it, she was so busy pushing back against it that it ended up putting her in a bad position and hurting her in the long run. And that is a concern I think that we have as content creators. I hate the fact that word even exists. Or that I'm applying. If my father, or particularly my grandfather, but my father said, you're a content creator, he would have beat me within an inch of my life. The only thing that would ever have gotten me beat harder, I took my family, we were just in Waco, and it was years ago. My daughter, wanted to go see the Magnolia thing that they have down there, the HDG TV people. And I'm just there looking around, and they had sprigs of dried cotton, for like $10. And I just looked at that, and in the back of my head, I could hear my grandfather say, if you buy this, I will come back and I will beat you like a redheaded stepchild. So, it's like, I mean, just the idea of calling myself a content creator, even though I know that's what I do, trust me, it ain't paying any bills, but it's what I'm doing. And Dean and I, and everyone on this channel takes the responsibility that we have very seriously. There's not a lot of people, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who don't, but we do. And so when Norio is talking about this, saying, hey, did I hurt people because of of his actions in the past? It rang very, very true, because over the last few years, I think we've seen a lot of people hurt by following advice that maybe wasn't fully formed, or following conspiracy theories that really weren't what they appeared. Maybe they were provided by the government to create this turmoil, to create the conflict that we see in our society. And so that scene spoke very much to me as a content creator, because I have a responsibility to you, the audience. You people are why we're here. We want to have better conversations because Dean, we believe in what we're doing. We believe truth is important. And the pursuit of that truth, though, if in itself is not done properly, can lead to harm. And that's something that both of us want to avoid. So again, it's a very short documentary. I do highly recommend it. It's going to be at Midwest Weird Fest, which is coming up this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And is it available anywhere else, or is it debuting?
No, I'll be honest. For our audience here, because you were just saying we want to be honest with them. At Midwest Weird Fest, I almost never play anything which isn't really brand spanking new. Like we have world premieres from significant filmmakers, for example, feature filmmakers, and like Melissa Tittle, we have Code 12 from. People probably have seen her on UFO Witness. She's one of the stars. She produced Ancient Aliens, which I know you and I don't agree with all the content of for many years, but she's a heavy hitter in this space, a really heavy hitter. And we have her world premiere film. So I love to get new content, but the Conspiratologist, outside of my normal kind of programming mandate, is actually available. People can go and find it and watch it for free on Vimeo. And it's spectacular. That doesn't mean you shouldn't come to Midwest Weird Fest and see 99% of the rest of the content, which you can't see anywhere else. But the Conspiratologist is so great, I wasn't not going to play it because it was available. That goes to show how highly I think of this documentary. So if you can't come to Midwest Weird Fest, you don't have to wait for a long time. You can go and watch that right now for free on Vimeo. Just Google the Conspiratologist and or go to Vimeo and plug it in and you'll find it. So it's definitely worth watching.
Very much. In fact, Jeff asked me, it's like, hey, what kind of books, on Monday, he was like, what kind of books do you recommend? I obviously recommended Joshua Cutchin and The Other Crowd. But as far as and again, I mentioned documentaries that we've talked about pretty very recently. This has got to be one of them now. This has got to be one of them. This, again, it's very, very short. Go watch it. It's on Vimeo. It's 30 minutes long. Please go give this a listen. The man has done enough work over the last 30 years that he deserves our respect, and when he says something, we should definitely listen to it. I cannot recommend it any better. In fact, we have the trailer for it. Dean was kind enough to get access to it, so we're going to play it real quick, and then we'll be back to send you all off properly.
Will you help me welcome Norio Hayakawa? Welcome, Norio. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Norio Hayakawa, and I am a resident of Torrance, California.
An unorthodox ufologist and activist.
His involvement in the UFO scene goes all the way back to the 1980s.
He has been researching UFOs for the last 45 years.
I've had a fascinating life, which I never regret.
Look at it now.
Smarter people to play that at the beginning.
Yeah, well, hopefully it'll encourage our audience to go and watch it now. Maybe we'd play it at the beginning. They would have just turned this off and then gone watch the documentary for real over on Vimeo. So.
Exactly. We're thinking ahead. That's what this is. See, Doug, we just didn't want people to just rush off and watch. We had them sit here, listen to us for an hour. We're so fired.
We are going to be. I can tell. See, it's coming down the pike. But I'd encourage people too, if they watch that documentary or if they enjoyed this show, to come and watch Talking Weird on Saturday night at 10 p.m. Which I pre-recorded again because I'll be at Midwest Weird Fest. But I had a wonderful conversation with Norio, such a gentleman, and I think there's some real revelations in that chat, and it's great just to hear Norio tell his tales and look at his perspective on things. So 10 p.m. on the Untold Radio Network, Talking Weird with Norio Hayakawa. this
I will
Saturday
I will be
night?
listening. I will definitely be tuning in for that one. It's going to be exciting. Again, I listen to all your shows. As all of you should, who are, if you're watching this, go listen to Dean. And again, we have a lot of great shows on this channel. Go show them some love. Go show Jeff some love for his, particularly for, again, Pine Island Research is a great show, but again, the coffee one, it's so different from what you're getting on most of our other shows. Every show is different. Go give them some love. But again, this weekend, Midwest Weird Fest, if you can't be there, you're missing out. I know I'm missing out. I'm going to be crawled up in my sock drawer and crying for days because I can't be there. But it'll be a lot of fun.
It's my most fun weekend of the year. It's spectacular, and I don't just say that because I've run a lot of festivals and been to a lot. There's something magical about. I shouldn't drop names, but I will. Greg Newkirk, who a lot of people probably know from Hellier and the like, and he's been, he's a very significant investigator. We played an episode of Hellier a couple of years ago, and Greg very kindly took me aside during the festival and said, "Dean, whatever you're doing here, don't stop it. This is magic." And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I think it's the cinema, I think it's the town, I think it's the filmmakers who come in. There's a magic feeling at Midwest Weird Fest. It's just like this, all these things come together, and everybody has just a wonderful time. So if you come, again, people might be able to make it this year, but think about coming a future year. We're always first weekend in March, and there's always a bunch of filmmakers, a bunch of people from this type of field and other, genres and the like in the fantasy and horror and sci-fi and underground realms. But it's a heck of a fun weekend. I'd love to see some listeners there. It would be so cool if somebody came up to me and said, "Yeah, I listen to Talking Weird on Mysterious Library." That'd be awesome.
So there you go. That's your job, guys. If you're available this weekend, go run, give Dean, love, hate, whatever. He just, say, I listen to Mysterious Library. Let me tell you how much I love or hate you because of it.
Tell me there really are ETs, and I'm just naive. I'm sure a lot of you probably think that because I'm so reluctant to accept the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Come and beat me up about that. Sometimes people do in the chat, so come and do it in my face.
Yeah.
Tell me you're stupid.
Exactly.
I'm not going to argue with you because I probably am stupid. So.
Oh yeah, no. Again, the show is, the fact that we can't figure out when to play the trailers or when to push the buttons is evidence. Yeah. Why beat us up in the chat when you can do it in person? It's way more fun.
Not literally. Please don't come and punch me upside the head because you think there are ETs in Area 51. Metaphorically, punch me upside the head.
Metaphorically speaking. No, not metaphorically speaking.
I don't want to be King Hit while I'm standing in the foyer talking to a filmmaker and somebody, you said there were no ETs. I'm telling you there are. That's not how I want my festival to end this year.
Exactly. Anyway, guys, this weekend's going to be awesome. If you can go, please go. It's going to be great. But definitely go watch this show, this documentary. It's free on Vimeo. It's only 30 minutes. It's well worth the time. On that note, we will be back next week, and hopefully Dean will be somewhat recovered from all the stress of putting together such a wonderful program that Midwest Weird Fest is. Again, it is amazing. I wish I could be there this year. I will be there next year with bells on so you can hear me coming. But we will see y'all next week behind the card catalog.
Thank you.